Hello, I'm Jay, and this is Relax with Jay. I create calming videos that allow you to relax and or drift off to sleep. If you enjoy my videos and find them helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe, and click on the notification bell. I hope you enjoyed this video and may it bring you restful sleep. Tonight, I'll be reading the second part of the story called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. If you enjoyed this part and would like me to read more, please let me know. That all might not be too onerous on the purpose of his rustic patron, who are apt to consider the cost of schooling a grievous burden, and schoolmasters as mere drones. He had various ways of rendering himself both useful and agreeable. He assisted the farmers occasionally in the lighter labor of their farms, helped to make hay, mended the fences, took the horses to water, drove the cows from pasture, and cut wood for the winter fire. He laid aside, too, all the dominant dignity and absolute sway which were enluded it is his little empire, the school, and became witfully gentle and ingrainedly. He found favor in the eyes of the mothers by petting the children, particularly the youngest, and like the lion bond which Willem so magnificently the lamb did hold, he would sit with a child on one knee and rock a cradle with his foot for long whole hours together. In addition to his other vocations, he was the singing master of the neighborhood and picked up many bright shillings by instructing the young folks in possedomy. It was a matter of no little vanity to him on Sundays to take his station in front of the church gallery with a band of chosen singers, where his own mind he completely carried away the palm from the parson. Certain it is his voice resounded far above all the rest of the congregation, and there are peculiar covers still to be heard in that church, and which may even be heard half a mile off. Quite so the opposite side of the mill pond, on a still Sunday morning, which are said to be legitimately descended from the noise of Archibald Crane. Thus, by divers little makeshifts, in that ingenious way which is commonly dominated by hook and by crook, and worthy purgatory got on tolerably enough, and was taught by who understood nothing of the labor of headwork to have a wonderfully easy life of it. The schoolmaster is generally a man of some importance in the female circle of a rural neighborhood, being considered a kind of idle, gentlemanlike personage of vastly superior taste and accomplishments to the rough country swains, and, indeed, inferior in learning only to their parson. His appearance, therefore, is apt to occasion some little stir at the tea-table or farmhouse, and the addition of the supplementary dish of cakes and sweetmeats, or peradventure the parade of a silver teapot. Our man of letters, therefore, was peculiarly happy in them in the churchyards, and therefore would however figure among them in between services on Sundays, gathering grapes from them from the well veins that overran the surrounding trees, reciting for their amusement all the epithymes on the tombstone, and southering with a whole bevy of them along the banks of the adjacent mill pond, while the more bashing country bumpkins hung sheepishly back, envying his superior elegance and address. From his half-irritated life, also, he was a kind of traveling gazette, carrying the whole budget of local gossip from house to house, so that his appearance was always greeted with satisfaction. He was, moreover, esteemed by the women as a man of great erudition, and for he had read several books quite thorough, and was perfect master of cotton matters, history of New England witchcraft, in which, by the way, he most firmly and potently believed. He was, in fact, an odd mixture of small shreweries nests and simple credulity. His appetite for the marvelous and his powers of digesting it were equally extraordinary, and both have been increased by his residence in this small-bound region. No tale was too gross or monstrous for his capricious swallow. It was often his delight, after his school was dismissed in the afternoon, to stretch himself on a rich bed of clover bordering, and the little brook that whimpered by his schoolhouse, their corn over old mother's dearfully tales, until the gathering dusk of evening made the printed page a mere mist before his eyes. Then, as he wended his way by swamp and stream and awful woodland to the farmhouse where he happened to be quartered, every sound of nature at that witching hour fluttered his excitement imagination. The moan of the whip-poor wailed from the hill-hide, and the bourdon cry of the tree-toad, the hadburgard of storm, the dreary hooting of the screech owl, or the sudden rustling in the cricket of birds frightened from the roost, the fireflies, too, which sparkled most vividly in the darkest places, now and then startled him, as one of the uncommon brightness would steam through across his path, as if, by chance, a huge blockload of a beetle came winging his blundering flight against him. The poor varlet was ready to give up the ghost, with the idea that he was struck with the witch token. His only resource on such occasions, either to drown thought or drive away evil spirits, was to sing psalm tunes and the good people of Sleepy Hollow. As they sat by their doors of an evening, were often filled with awe or hearing his nasal melody, in linked sweetness long drawn out, floating from the distant hill or along the dusky road. Another of his sources of fearful pleasures was to pass along winter evenings with the old Dutch wives, as they sat spinning by the fire, with a roll of apple roasting and spluttering along the hearth, and listening to their marvelous tales of ghosts and goblins and haunted fields and haunted brooks and haunted bridges and haunted houses, and particularly of the headless horseman or galloping Hessian of the hollow, as they sometimes called him. He would delight them equally by his anecdotes of witchcraft, and of the fearful omens and portentous sights and sounds in the air which prevailed in the early times of Connecticut, and would frighten them woefully with speeches upon comets and shooting stars, and with the alarming fact that the world did absolutely turn round, and that they were half the time topsy-turvy. But if there was a pleasure in all this, while snuggling cuddly in the chimney corner of a chamber that was all of a ruddy glow from the crackling wood fire, and where, of course, no spectre dared to show its face, it was dearly pressured by the terrors of his subsequent walk homewards. What fearful shapes and shadows beset his path amidst the dim and ghastly glare of the snowy night! With what wistful look did he eye every trembling ray of light streaming across the waste fields from some distant window! How often was he appalled by some scrub covered with snow, which, like a sheeted spectre, beset his very path! How often did he shrink with curdling awe at the sound of his own steps on the frosty crust beneath his feet, and dread to look over his shoulder, lest he should behold some uncouth being trampling close behind him! And how often was he thrown into complete dismay by some rushing blast, howling among the tree in the idea that it was the galloping Hassan on one of his nightly soarings. All these, however, were mere terrors of the night, phantom of the mind that walk in darkness, and though he had seen many spectres in his time, and been more than one beset by Satan in his diverse shapes, in his lonely perambulation, yet daylight put an end to all this evil, and would have passed a pleasant life of it, in despite of the devil and all his work, if his path had not been crossed by a being that causes more perplexity to mortal men than ghosts, goblins, and the whole race of witches put together, that was a woman. Among the musical discipline who assembled one evening in each week to receive his instruction in palmoldy was Catherine van Tussel, the daughter and only child of a substantial Dutch farmer. She was a blooming lass of fresh 18, plump as a partridge, ripe and melting, and rosy-cheeked as one of her father's peaches, and universally famed not merely for her father's speeches and beauty, but her vast expectation. She was withal a little of a coquette, as might be perceived even in her dress, which was a mixture of ancient and modern fashion, as most suited to set off her charm. She wore the ornament of pure yellow gold which her great-great-grandmother had brought over from Sardem, the tempting stomacher of the olden time, and withal a provokingly short petticoat to display the prettiest foot and ankle in the country round. Aishabad Crane had a soft and foolish heart toward the sex, and it is not to be wondered at that so tempting or morsel soon found favor in his eyes, more especially after he had visited her in her parental mansion. Old Baltus Van Tussel was a perfect picture of a thriving, contented, liberal-hearted farmer. He seldom, it is true, sent either his eyes or his thoughts behind the boundaries of his own farm, but within those everything was snug, happy, and well-conditioned. He was satisfied with his wealth, but not proud of it, and piqued himself upon the hearty abundance rather than the style in which he lived. His stronghold was suited in on the side of the banks of the Hudson, in one of those green sheltered, fertile hooks in which the Dutch farmer are soon fond of nestling. A great elm tree spread its broad branches over it, at the foot of which bubbled upon a spring of the softest and sweetest water in a little well formed of a barrel, and then stole sparkling away through the grass to a neighboring brook that babbled along among alder and dwarf's willows. Hard by the farmhouse was a vast barn that might have served for a church, every window and crevice of which seemed bristling forth with the treasures of the farm. The vale was busily resounding within it from the morning to the night. Shallows and martins skimmed twittering about the elves, and rows of pigeons, some with one eye turned up as if watching the weather, some with their heads under their wings or buried in their bosoms, and others swelling and cooning and bowing about their dames, were enjoying the sunshine on the roof. Sleek, unwieldy porkers were grunting in the repose and abundance of their pens, from whence sailed forth now then troops of sucking pigs, as if to snuff the air. A stately quadrome of snowy geese were riding in an adjoining pond, convoying whole fleets of duck. Regiments of turkey were gobbling through the farmyard, and guinea fowls flitting about it like its ill-tempered housewives with their peevish, discontented cry. From the barn there strutted the gallant cock, the pattern of a husband and a warrior and a fine gentleman, clapping his brownish wings and croning in the pride and gladness of his heart. sometimes tearing up the earth with his feet, and then generously calling his ever-hungry family of wives and children to enjoy the rich morsel which he had discovered. The Prigogorgi mouth watered as he looked upon this sumptuous promise of luxurious winter fare. In his devouring mind-eye, he pictured to himself every roasting pig running about with a puddling in his belly and an apple in his mouth, and the pigeon was snugly put to bed in a comfortable pie and tucked in with a coverlet of rust, and the geese were swimming in their own gravy, and the ducks fairly ghostly in dishes like snug married couples, with a decent competency of onion sauce. In the porkers he saw carved out the future sleek side of bacon and the juicy relishing ham. Not a turkey, but he beheld daintily trussed up, with its gizzed under its wing, and peradventure a necklace of savory sausages, and even bright Chantillier himself lay sprawling on his back in a side dish with uplifting claws, as if craving that quarter that which his cavarious spirit disdained to ask while living.